In this video, we're going to go over cards that have effects that can basically get rid of all the cards on your opponent's side of the field. And at number 10, we have Witch's Strike. This is a counter card that was designed to counter the Solemn counter trap cards, which are a series of counter trap cards that are heavily played in meta decks, which have effects that counter other things. As what Witch's Strike does is, if your opponent negates the summon of a monster, or the activation of a card effect, you can then activate this card afterwards, which will allow you to destroy all cards on your opponent's side of the field and in their hand. So that's a pretty big effect if you're able to pull this card off. And you'd think, since the Solemn cards are so heavily played, that Witch's Strike would see more play, but it really doesn't. It's a little bit too slow to see play in normal meta decks, and not every single top deck plays the Solemn cards. It does also work off of some hand traps, more specifically Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion, which is a hand trap that can be activated when you try to move a card from the graveyard somewhere else, and it has a distinction where it negates the activation of the effect rather than the effect itself, like Ash Blossom does. So Ghost Bell can activate Witch's Strike, but Ghost Bell isn't anywhere near as heavily played as Ash Blossom. If maybe Witch's Strike could work on cards like Ash Blossom, it might see more play, but considering the power of this card, that's probably for the best that it isn't. And at number 9, we have number C69, Heraldry Crest of Horror. This is a rank 5 monster, which has the effect that when an opponent's monster declares an attack, you can destroy all cards your opponent controls. This effect is not once per turn either, but I doubt you'll be resolving it more than one time per turn, as if you destroy all your opponent's cards, they won't be able to attack with anything else. This card also has a baseline attack of 4,000, and another effect that doesn't really get used. Now, this card did see play in Burning Abyss decks, surprisingly, back in the day. For those of you who don't know, Burning Abyss decks revolve around level 3 monsters, and this is a rank 5 Exceeds monster, who has effects relating to a rank 4 Exceeds monster, neither of which have anything to do with level 3 monsters. Well, there's a thing called Rank Up Magic Astral Force, which allows you to rank up a monster that's 2 ranks higher as long as they share the exact same attribute and type. And rank 3 monsters have access to Chronomaly Crystal Chrononaut, which is a light psychic type rank 3 monster, who, if ranked up with Rank Up Magic Astral Force, can be ranked up into Crest of Horror, who is a light psychic type monster. And its stats and effect to destroy all your opponent's cards, if they dare attack, were good enough for this card to actually see competitive play, and it also occasionally sees play in rank up focused level 4 decks as well. And at number 8, we have Earthbound Immortal, CCarayhua. This card has the effect that if it's destroyed by a card effect, you can destroy all the cards on the field. And what's interesting about this card is that it doesn't specify where this card is destroyed from. So, if you destroy this card in your hand, with a Fire King card or a Dragonic Diagram, you can activate this card's effect to destroy all the cards on the field, from your hand, which is basically how this card saw play, and it was rarely actually brought onto the field to do other things, where its on-field effect is that it can attack directly, it can't be targeted for attacks, and it destroys itself if there's no face-up field spell card. And at number 7, we have Beast King Barbaros. This card has the effect that you can choose to tribute 3 monsters in order to tribute summon this card, and if you choose to summon it in this way, you can destroy all cards your opponent controls. Now, what's interesting about this card is that it can be summoned in 2 other ways as well, as it has another effect where you can normal summon this card without any tributes at the cost of just setting this card's original attack to 1900, which is not half bad for a non-normal tribute summon. And you can also tribute summon this card with just 2 tributes like normal, for no additional effects. Now, because of the versatility of this card, where you can bring it out without tributes, or you can bring it out with 3 tributes to destroy your opponent's entire field, this card did see competitive play when it came out, and just occasionally would see competitive play over the years, where the last time this card saw play was in 2019, in a Danger Blue Eyes Guard Dragon deck, because they ran a whole bunch of level 8 monsters, and also had a whole bunch of tribute fodder, which was perfect for this card, which both loves tribute fodder and is also a level 8 monster itself. And at number 6, we have Outer Entity Azathoth. This card is currently banned, and not because of its ability to destroy all your opponent's cards. This card has the effect where if it has at least 3 Exceeds materials, who are Fusion, Synchro, and another Exceeds monster, then you can detach 1 material from this card to destroy all cards your opponent controls. Now, this was actually not as hard to accomplish as you'd think, when Elder Entity Norden was still legal, as there's a level 4 Synchro monster called Old Entity Cthugha, and a rank 4 Exceeds monster called Outer Entity Gnarla. So as long as you could get Cthugha in the graveyard through a proper Synchro summon, you could then use Instant Fusion to bring out Elder Entity Norden. Use Norden's effect to bring out Cthugha from the graveyard, use the 2 of them to go into an Exceed summon of Outer Entity Gnarla, and then just simply rank up Outer Entity Azathoth on top of Gnarla, as Azathoth has an effect that allows you to rank it up on another Outer Entity Exceeds monster. And then you have all of the conditions fulfilled for its destroy all of your opponent's cards effect. With Elder Entity Norden banned though, this is much harder to accomplish. And with Outer Entity Azathoth getting banned recently, it's no longer even possible. And the reason Azathoth is banned is because it has another effect, where when this card is Exceed summoned, your opponent cannot activate monster effects for the rest of the turn. So if you simply bring this card out during your opponent's turn, with something like Phantom Knight's Rank Up Magic Launch, a quick play Rank Up Magic card, then you could lock your opponent out of monster effects for the entire turn. And with the Link monster, Phantom Knights of the Rusty Bardiche, you could easily search out that Rank Up Magic card and easily get a material on the field in order to go into Azathoth during your opponent's turn. And that's why this card is kind of lower on this list, even though this card is banned. It's not banned because of its ability to destroy all your opponent's cards. And at number 5, we have number 86, Heroic Champion Rhongomyniad. This is another card that's currently banned, but not because of its ability to destroy all your opponent's cards. This card gains effects equal to the amount of Exceeds materials it has, and if it has 5 Exceeds material attached to it, it gains the effect to, once per turn, destroy all cards your opponent controls. With 4 or more materials, it locks your opponent out of summoning monsters. And at 3 or more materials, this card is also unaffected by all other card effects. Its attack and defense go to 3000, then it cannot be destroyed by battle. And it's these effects which is why this card is currently banned. Now originally, this card was supposed to be balanced around the fact that it's kind of hard to get 5 materials on this monster, so it was never broken, but it did occasionally see play. Then they released a card called number 76, Bamboozling Gossip Shadow, a card which can just attach itself and all of its Exceeds materials to Rhongomyniad then had all of a sudden become much easier to get all 5 materials on it, as all you had to do was just bring out Rhongomyniad with 2 level 4 monsters, then just bring out Bamboozling Gossip Shadow with 2 Exceeds materials, and then you could just move Gossip Shadow over to Rhongomyniad, and he'd instantly get up to 5 materials. And because some decks were able to get out both of these cards a little bit too easily, thereby shutting down your opponent and destroying all of their cards, they ended up banning Rhongomyniad. And at number 4, we have Black Rose Dragon. This card has the effect that when it's synchro summoned, you can destroy all cards on the field, including itself, but even though it destroys itself in the process, this effect was pretty good where this card appeared on the ban list for a couple of years. As if you had the ability to go into a level 7 synchro monster, you could destroy all the cards in the field, which used to be a really good effect back in the synchro era, and I guess that is still pretty good even today. It's just we have things like the number 3 spot, which lets you do this, but a little bit easier instead. And with how Destrudo allows you to go into level 7 synchros pretty easily, this card is actually not that hard to bring out, and some decks even bring it out during your opponent's turn, which is better than using it during your turn, because you can use its effect to wipe out your opponent's field to disrupt their entire turn, rather than trying to destroy an established board during your turn. Black Rose Dragon is so well known for its ability to destroy the field that most people don't even know it has a second effect, where it can banish a plant monster from your graveyard to swap one of your opponent's defense position monsters to attack position and change their attack to 0. This effect isn't half bad, but it's not as versatile as its ability to destroy the field on its summon. And at number 3, we have Evilswarm Exciton Knight. This is a generic rank 4 monster which has a spell speed 2 effect to destroy all other cards on the field, under the conditions that it's the main phase or your opponent's battle phase, and your opponent has more total cards than you do. So basically, if your opponent was ahead of you in card advantage, you could go into this card in order to destroy their entire field. And this effect was incredibly hard to stop. Because you see, this effect was not once per turn, and this effect only required detaching one material, where it would start out with 2 materials. So since this card is a quick effect, if your opponent tried to negate the effect, you could just do it again, as long as it wasn't in the same chain link, as it, at least, had that restriction where it couldn't use its effect twice in the same chain. Your opponent had to negate this card's effect 2 times in order to actually stop it from destroying all the cards on the field, and it could do this during both players' turns, which made this card a little bit broken considering how easy it was to bring out. As I should remind you that level 4 monsters are the most plentiful types of monsters in the game, and this card got banned for a few years and only really came off the ban list recently because Xyz monsters don't see as much play in Master Rule 4. Although with the Master Rule revisions coming out pretty soon, this card might end up on the ban list again once people remember how good its effect was. And at number 2, we have Judgment Dragon, the boss monster of one of the most played and long-lasting meta decks of the game's history. Judgment Dragon has the effect where you can pay 1,000 life points to destroy all other cards on the field. So this card actually gets to survive the board wipe, unlike Black Rose Dragon. And this effect is not once per turn. You can use its effect as many times as you want, as long as you have life points to pay. So if your opponent's monsters float into other monsters, you can just use Judgment Dragon's effect again to destroy those new cards, and just keep doing it until your opponent doesn't have anything left. And the conditions to summon this card is just to have 4 or more Lightsworn monsters with different names in your graveyard. So if you have other copies of Judgment Dragon in your hand, you can just bring them out after you wipe out the field, as all of the conditions are basically the same. And since Lightsworns are all about sending cards from the deck to the graveyard, its conditions are pretty easy to fulfill. Judgment Dragon is such a good boss monster that Lightsworn decks have basically seen competitive play since this card was first introduced, and they haven't really stopped seeing competitive play since, even though Judgment Dragon has gone on and off the ban list over the years. Currently, Judgment Dragon is unlimited, still currently sees competitive play, and is still an absolute beast of a boss monster, where they were very careful about giving other boss monsters once per turns on their destruction effects, after they kind of messed up with Judgment Dragon. And at number 1, we have Chaos Emperor Dragon, Envoy of the End. Now technically this list was for any cards, which get rid of all cards your opponent controls and not just technically destroying them. It's just kind of a coincidence that every single card on this list up to this point specifically destroyed cards instead of banishing them or returning them. As Chaos Emperor Dragon has the effect where you can pay 1,000 life points to send all other cards in both players' sides of the field and their hand into the graveyard, to then inflict 300 points of damage to your opponent for each card sent to the graveyard with its effect. This card is also incredibly easy to summon from your hand, as all you have to do is banish 1 light and dark monster from your graveyard. And this card was basically the reason cards are banned in Yu-Gi-Oh! Because it was so strong when it first came out that it basically forced Konami to get rid of this card from the meta because of its power level. And even then, the card was so powerful that there was no way they could ever unban it unless they changed its effect, which is exactly what they did, where it still has the same effect, only it actually has restrictions on it, where you can't use any other card effects during the turn you use this card's effect. So, since this card sends a whole bunch of cards to the graveyard, if you're just playing a graveyard-centric deck like Orchist, for example, you could just use this card to get rid of your opponent's field and hand, and then just do your plays like normal. But with its new errata restrictions, you have to wait a turn before you're able to do that. And this would also have to be the first thing you did during your turn, so you wouldn't be able to set up your graveyard for its card summoning conditions, and use its effect in the same turn that you brought it out. So, the restriction actually did a really good job of slowing this card's powerful effect down, to the point where this card is currently unlimited and doesn't seem overly powerful, even if it does still occasionally see competitive play. Because it basically takes 3 turns to set up. 1 turn to get the cards in your graveyard, 1 turn to actually use its effect, and then your 3rd turn to actually do things from the graveyard, instead of all of that happening on 1 turn. So this card kind of takes the top spot for its historical purposes, and the fact that even in its nerfed state, it still sees competitive play. Alright, and that's the list. If you have any other ideas for videos just like this one, really specific top 10s, I'd love to hear about them down in the comments. And did you know, Only 26.5% of people who watch these videos are subscribed to the channel. So if you like these kinds of videos, you should probably subscribe to be notified when new ones come out.